The summit began with 17 languages arguing at once. John Halvers sat on the far edge of the Earth delegation's platform, clenching a cup of synthetic tea that tasted faintly like melted batteries and hubris. His job was technically cultural liaison, but unofficially he was known as the do not speak until asked guy. It suited him fine. People with ideas got noticed. People who got noticed got responsibility. And in a room full of aliens with diplomatic immunity and disintegration jewelry, that sounded like a fast route to obliteration. He watched as Ambassador Liu, polished and steely-eyed, tried to remain neutral while a moss-covered delegate from the Xin coalition accused Earth of chronological disrespect, whatever that meant. Something about time zones? Time-based insults? John had stopped tracking the logic after someone used the term emotional entropy unironically. Behind a wide crystalline dais, the Virexi queen had not yet spoken. She sat at an absurd angle, a throne carved from some kind of living stone that pulsed faintly beneath her. Queen Aralee of Virex, known across 8 sectors for annexing moons and making subordinates weep with a glance. Her skin shimmered with a hue that wasn't quite gold or silver, and her long, velveted ears twitched with the kind of detached amusement one might show toward a misbehaving hologram. John tried not to look at her. He failed. Their eyes locked. It was not a long moment. It didn't need to be. Something flickered in her expression, an interest, a decision, and possibly a bit of pity. She rose, her movements liquid and slow, as if gravity bent a little differently around her. The chamber fell silent, even the Moss delegate freezing mid-rant. Aralee's voice was a low chime, sharp at the edges. "I have made my selection." The chamber's translator scrambled. A few words came through as static. Others rippled through John's earpiece like a suspiciously flirtatious sneeze. She raised her arm, pointed. At him. "Human, you are no longer single." John blinked, then looked behind him, then back to her. He raised a single index finger to his own chest, mouthing, "Me?" She nodded once. There was a sound like several glass flutes being dropped in unison. The Earth ambassador made a noise, not unlike a raccoon sneezing into a megaphone. Somewhere on the Xin side, someone burst into applause, apparently interpreting this as a successful assassination. John stood up. He did not remember standing up. His legs had made the decision on his behalf. A nearby aide whispered, sit down, for God's sake, sit down." But it was too late. Aralee was already striding toward him, her ceremonial robes glinting with microprocessors and something disturbingly alive. She stopped 2 feet from him. The room smelled suddenly of crushed ice and ozone. "You have been claimed," she said. "The right of bound alignment is now in effect." What alignment? I didn't study." "Wait, claimed?" "You are honored," she said helpfully. "I'm terrified." A common symptom of honor. He opened his mouth, closed it, reopened it. "I had a meeting after this," he muttered. "No longer." "Okay. What exactly does this mean in your culture?" There was a pause. She tilted her head slightly. "Marriage." A louder pause, then John laughed. Not the hearty kind, more the sharp, high-pitched bark of a man, realizing he might have just been legally married in front of 17 species and a recording drone. "This is a diplomatic prank, right? Intergalactic candid camera? I'm going to wake up in a sweat and the tea will taste like sadness again." She stepped closer. "Your scent is acceptable," she said. "I'm wearing deodorant called Midnight Steel. That can't be right." Her lips twitched. A smile, or maybe a warning. It was hard to tell. Her ears gave a gentle twitch that seemed pleased. Behind him, Lou was whispering rapidly into a communicator, possibly to legal, or Earth's military, or his mother. "The rite will proceed tonight," Aralee said. "Ceremony is brief. Your consent is not a requirement. Virexi law has precedent over Terran hesitation." "That's a very poetic way of saying, too bad," John replied. "You understand quickly. You will adjust. Come." He didn't move. His limbs had frozen. His brain was still stuck on the part where he'd made eye contact and accidentally got engaged. I don't have a change of clothes." "Virex will provide," she said, already turning. "Please no feathers," he added. "Or live accessories. I once wore a scarf that bit me." The queen did not respond. She swept out of the chamber, her entourage parting like magnetized ink in her wake. A delegation drone followed, making a soft pinging noise that suggested excitement or doom. Possibly both. John remained standing, holding the now empty cup. Someone nudged him. "You're still on the diplomatic clock," Liu muttered. "Try not to cause an interplanetary incident. Again." "I'm married now," John said numbly. "Sure you are." "No, really. I think I just married a royal alien warlord with mood-sensitive ears." "Welcome to diplomacy." A pair of Virexi attendants appeared, each with gleaming masks and outfits that looked designed by someone who'd lost a bet with physics. One held out a scroll that unrolled itself mid-air, projected holographically. The other began scanning John's measurements with something that beeped whenever it got near his knees. "This is all a dream," he whispered to himself. One of the attendants raised a thin brow. "If this is a dream, do not wake." "Oh, good," John muttered. "Even the help does poetry." The scroll read, "By order of her magnificent authority, Arale of House Vale, sovereign of Virex, Tamare of the 13 Sons, keeper of the veil, she who chooses, and mistress of the woven flame." "Wow, that's a lot of titles," John muttered. "The human known as John Halvers is hereby designated Consort Prime, bound by the sacred right of alignment, afforded all honors, duties, and access codes therein." "Access codes?" The scroll finished with a little musical chime and disintegrated into sparkles. One of the attendants handed him a box. Inside was a ring, a tunic that looked suspiciously sentient, and a card that read, "Try not to die. It makes the queen angry." John sighed. "Is there at least a buffet?" John awoke in a bed the size of a tennis court, dressed in something silky and self-warming, blinking up at a ceiling that slowly rotated through constellations he didn't recognize. A polite chime sounded near his ear, and a soft voice said, "Good morning, consort. Would you like to begin the traditional ceremony of fruit recognition?" "No," John mumbled, trying to sit up without tangling himself in the blanket, which seemed to be tucked in by a sadist or possibly sentient itself. "Very well," said the voice. "Fruit will remain unrecognized." A section of wall dematerialized, revealing a hovering table bearing breakfast, transparent cubes, steaming spheres, and one thing that resembled an omelet if an omelet had opinions about jazz. He sat up carefully, scanning the room. There were no doors, only curved partitions that shimmered faintly, like polite force fields. He suspected they wouldn't open unless they were in the mood. He picked up one of the transparent cubes. It vibrated. "Okay, breakfast roulette it is." There was a faint hum, and the wall shimmered again. A tall figure entered wearing robes woven from shifting light. The being had 4 arms, no discernible nose, and a clipboard. "Consort John Halvers," they intoned. "I am Elzin. I am your acclamation officer. You will learn Virexi etiquette, law, culture, history, and the correct method of not offending anyone important." "I've already failed that last one. Spectacularly." Elzin did not blink, possibly couldn't. "Your offenses have been canonized. Chapter 3 of the archives has been retitled The Incident of Unsolicited Eye Contact." John rubbed his face. "That's going in the history books, isn't it?" "Correct. Now dress yourself. We begin with post-claymation rituals and a lecture on fork hierarchy." The tunic from yesterday folded itself and floated toward him. It smelled faintly of lavender and software updates. 30 minutes later, John stood beside Elzin in a vast hall, where the floor subtly rebalanced to keep guests from falling over. Dozens of Virexi dignitaries watched from their designated levitation platforms. Each wore an expression that ranged from curious to appalled. A trio of aristocrats hissed like punctured air mattresses when John waved at them. At the far end of the hall, Queen Arale sat on her throne, unreadable. Her long ears twitched once as he approached, which Elzin had told him meant acknowledgement without amusement. He bowed, or at least tried. He leaned too far and had to recover with a half spin and a wave. There was a collective intake of breath. Elzin whispered, "That was technically a gesture of submission." John whispered back, "Well, that tracks." Arale rose. "You are now bound to the crown by right and law. Your presence is subject to scrutiny, tradition, and a 12-part ceremony that will not be repeated." John nodded solemnly. Can we skip to the part with snacks? The Queen's ear twitched again. It might have been a laugh, or it might have been preparation for incineration. The ceremony continued. There were declarations, oaths, holograms, and a segment where John was instructed to place his hand inside a hovering cube that analyzed his bone structure and sang a short lullaby in response. Afterward, he was led to the royal gardens, which hovered several meters above the actual ground and featured trees that occasionally applauded. Elzen quizzed him on Virexi etiquette as they walked past carnivorous flowers and mood-reactive vines. What does it mean when a Virexi noble turns their back on you during a greeting? Elzen asked. They're inviting me to duel. Number that is an expression of mild approval. And if they sneeze in my direction, that is a declaration of war? Right, so, back turned, good. Sneeze, bad. Easy. Do not oversimplify. I'm literally married to a woman who claimed me like a lost slipper in front of 20 alien governments. I think simplification is how I've survived. That night, John was escorted to his new quarters by a pair of guards who glowed faintly blue and refused to blink. Inside, a familiar voice greeted him. Hello, John, said a calm feminine tone. I am Sarah, the sentient architectural residence assistant. I will be managing your daily schedule, your nutritional intake, and your privacy levels. John sighed with relief. Finally, a voice that doesn't sound like a diplomatic drone having an existential crisis. Sarah replied, Thank you. I have been practicing sarcasm. Fantastic. Can you explain what half my wardrobe is made from? Silk generated by Virexi shadow worms. Very fashionable. Also slightly flammable. And the royal bed? Filled with programmable gel. Responds to dreams. That sounds illegal. It is. On 3 moons. He sat down at a console. Okay, Sarah. Real question. Does the Queen really expect this to be real? This marriage thing? Queen Aralee does not perform ritual for the sake of pageantry. She chooses with intention. Well, her intention is probably regretting me by now. She has reviewed footage of your grape incident 8 times. Her ears twitched each time. Fantastic. My legacy is fruit-based. There was a knock, more a shift in air pressure than a sound. He turned. Aralee stood at the threshold, her ears high, her posture like a comet in mid-course. I thought we should speak privately, she said. I've been speaking to a wall AI for an hour. Then you are well prepared. She stepped inside. The door sealed behind her with a noise that sounded suspiciously like commitment. I will not pretend this is typical, she said, but Virexi law is unyielding. When I chose you, it became truth. There is no reversal. John nodded slowly. No pressure. She regarded him a moment longer. You have not attempted to curry favor. You have not groveled. You have not even tried to understand our hierarchy. I've been here for 48 hours. I only just figured out how to use the bathroom without a translator. Her mouth twitched. He couldn't tell if it was irritation or entertainment. Your humility is confusing, she said. It's not humility, it's survival. A long pause, then quietly she added, You are not what I expected. He smiled faintly. Neither are you. I assumed galactic monarch meant more robes and less kidnapping. Another pause, then she said, You are permitted to make jokes. That's good, because I'm probably going to panic joke my way through the next week. Then I shall prepare the royal patience. She turned but paused at the door. John? Yes, Your Majesty. You do not belong here, and yet you do not repel me. High praise. Then she was gone. Sarah whispered. Her ears twitched. Twice. Progress, John murmured. Weird, terrifying progress. The royal breakfast chamber was more of a kinetic dining amphitheater. Every seat was self-adjusting, every utensil was self-sterilizing, and the orange juice was, according to the hovering label, expressed from a fruit that used to be sentient but has since retired. John stared at the bowl in front of him. It was making occasional chirping sounds and shuffling its contents, like a confused DJ trapped in a salad. He poked it. It hissed. He gave up. Across the long crescent table, Queen Aralee sat in serene silence, sipping a drink that pulsed faintly purple. Her attendants stood in disciplined rows, blinking in rotational harmony. John cleared his throat. So, I had a dream last night where the bed tried to negotiate trade agreements with me. Airley's gaze slid over to him. Did you agree to anything? I think I gave it rights to my closet. Might explain why I woke up dressed like an ambassador from Disco Planet. She made a low sound that might have been amusement or indigestion. He took it as a win. Elzen arrived moments later, 4 arms full of scrolls, a tablet, and something with too many hinges. Consort, your acclamation itinerary continues. Today you must complete your social legitimacy sequence. That sounds deeply optional. It is mandatory, John stood. Please tell me it involves fewer mystery breakfasts and more sitting quietly in non-lethal chairs. Incorrect. You will undergo interviews, undergo a neural compatibility scan, and engage in minimal ceremonial combat. He blinked. Did you just say combat? Minimal. John looked to Airley for backup. She took another sip and said, surviving this will raise your approval rating. That implies I have an approval rating. You are polling better than the previous consort. What happened to them? Imploded. He paused. Like emotionally or... Elzen clapped once. To the scan chamber. The scan chamber smelled like peppermint and clinical dread. John stood in the middle of a transparent sphere while beams of soft light passed over him, pausing occasionally to vibrate or mutter diagnostics in some sort of musical code. A nearby technician whispered, his neurofractal signature is extremely unstructured. He's from Earth, Elzen replied. Their brains are known for erratic logic patterns and something called doom scrolling. John raised a hand. Hey, I'll have you know I only doom scroll during meals, awkward silences, or global crises. Exactly. The scan completed with a tone that sounded like a sarcastic harp. A display hovered into view, showcasing a series of colorful spirals. Elzen tilted their head. Your brain is surprisingly resistant to Virexi bonding protocols. I had an ex who was into meditation apps. I built up immunity. You are either uniquely stable or cosmically inconvenient. John shrugged. Why not both? Later, he was fitted with a ceremonial uniform for the legitimacy parade. It consisted of metallic draping, a sash that blinked with mood indicators, and boots that magnetized slightly when he walked too fast. Sarah whispered in his ear, your left knee is currently calibrated for diplomatic restraint. He replied under his breath, please recalibrate it for fleeing awkward conversations. That function is reserved for royal concubines. I'll take the application form later. The parade took place on a levitating platform shaped like a wide crescent blade. Thousands of Virexi citizens watched from balconies, sky bridges, and floating garden pods. When John waved, a ripple of cautious applause passed through the crowd, followed by a polite sound that resembled distant throat clearing. Elzen narrated in a low voice. That is the traditional Virexi acknowledgement of a public figure who has not yet failed catastrophically. Great. I'm one media scandal away from an aggressive cough. Beside him, Airley was stone still, projecting regal grace. He leaned toward her slightly. You know, on Earth, newlyweds usually take a honeymoon, somewhere with beaches, little paper umbrellas, no public parades or scanning rituals. She didn't turn. Virex does not permit frivolity during political alignment. Well, maybe Virex needs to discover cabanas and mid-morning naps. She glanced sideways. You are strange. I prefer the term culturally nuanced. After the parade, the two of them were ushered into a smaller chamber for the final ritual. Ceremonial combat. John stood across from a hulking Virexi warrior in armor that clicked menacingly whenever he breathed. Elzen handed John a training staff. This is symbolic, they said. You need only survive 90 seconds. The warrior growled. I do not support this union. Great, John muttered. Really great to have your blessing. The staff lit up in his hands, humming softly. John took a deep breath, immediately forgot everything the AI had told him about Virexi battle etiquette, and adopted what he hoped was a neutral stance. The warrior lunged. John panicked. He dropped the staff, ducked wildly, rolled sideways, and accidentally triggered the magnetic boots mid-turn. They pulled him into a spiral, flinging him directly into the warrior's knees. The warrior toppled like a disgruntled skyscraper. Silence. Then, a single incredulous laugh from the Queen's throne. Elzen cleared their throat. Ceremonial combat concluded. John looked up from the floor. Do I get a scorecard? You get immunity from further combat. I'll take it. That evening, he returned to his quarters, staff bruises forming in interesting constellations. Airily arrived shortly after, silent as always. You fought creatively, she said. I fought accidentally. Creativity and accident are sometimes indistinguishable. He rubbed his shoulder. You're full of comfort today. You survived. Technically. There was a pause, her ears shifted. I have begun to understand your function, she said. My function. You are disruptive. He looked at her, alarmed. In a useful way, she added. Oh, well, that's the nicest thing someone said to me after I knocked over a soldier with my face. She stepped closer. This alliance is different than expected. You mean you didn't plan to tie your fate to a snarky Earth bureaucrat with social anxiety and snack-based coping mechanisms? I did not. Good, Sean, John said, because I didn't plan on marrying an 8-foot-tall space empress with legal ownership of a moon and the emotional range of a particularly polite glacier. Her ears twitched. She stepped even closer. This is not what I intended, she said softly. No, he replied, but I think it might be the best diplomatic crisis I've ever been in. John sat in the middle of what the Virexi called a harmony council, which was neither harmonious nor a council, but more of a weekly argument disguised as a legislative puppet show. Around him, 37 officials levitated in softly glowing orbs, each of them competing to outdeclare, outglare, and outglow one another. Some used translators, others simply shouted louder, convinced that volume was a universal language. A particularly large delegate from the Larnai cluster waved what looked like a golden tentacle and roared, "The human consort destabilizes protocol with his presence." John smiled politely. I destabilize most things with my presence, to be fair. The translator coughed. He confirms. Queen Airily sat 2 seats above him, perfectly composed, like a queen-shaped dagger carved from ice. She didn't speak, but her ears had shifted back a full centimeter. Elzen's chart had confirmed that was the Virexi equivalent of mild annoyance, bordering on the desire to vaporize something decorative. John leaned toward her. Should I say something diplomatic or something sarcastic? Do not speak. Right, so sarcasm then. Elzen materialized beside him, as usual, holding 6 data slates and a cup of what John hoped was coffee. There has been an increase in cross-sector memes featuring you. The most recent is titled Earthboy versus the Bureaucrats. You are depicted as a mildly panicked woodland creature holding a treaty upside down. Accurate. The meme's approval rating has surpassed most royal announcements. So I'm what passes for relatable content on this planet. Correct. The council continued arguing, but John tuned them out and focused on the strange flickering along the room's edges. Subtle, rhythmic, like bad Wi-Fi trying to manifest into sentience. He whispered to Sarah through his wrist link. Any reason the council chamber looks like it's buffering? Spatial instability in the northern quadrant. Quantum drag from the orbital observatory recalibration. Mild risk of interdimensional interference. Mild? On a scale from spilled beverage to timeline rupture. Misplaced keys. Good, I can handle that. Unless the keys explode. Unknown. After the council adjourned, with no resolution and several injuries to dignity, John was guided to a diplomatic meet and greet with visiting dignitaries from the Cathari swarm. The Cathari were insectoid, polite, and had the unnerving habit of finishing each other's sentences, often mid-word. One of them presented John with a decorative hive fragment as a gift. He bowed. Thank you. I'll put it somewhere respectful. The Cathari hummed as one. He is tolerable. Back in his quarters, John collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. It was displaying a slow-motion simulation of nebula formation, complete with dreamy music. He turned to Sarah. Do we have any data on interdimensional instability near the council chamber? There are anomalies, temporal echoes, possible overlapping of Virexi Prime with its mirror twin in the beta reflection layer. I don't like the sound of that. No one does. It is described as like biting into a fruit that was peeled in another reality. I did that once. Still haunts me. Moments later, Airly entered without knocking. She never knocked. Queens apparently didn't knock unless they were invading. You notice the flicker, she said. I notice everything that makes the air taste like static and makes chairs briefly disappear. Then you will accompany me to the observatory. John sat up. To do what exactly? I'm a former logistics coordinator. I can't fix rips in space-time. You are bonded to the throne. If the rift recognizes royal authority, it may stabilize. So I'm basically a cosmic good luck charm with opposable thumbs. Precisely. They traveled via gravity corridor to the upper observatory, where telescopic arrays hung like spiders made of polished silver. The staff bowed as they passed, their eyes flickering with unease. John resisted the urge to wave. Elzen met them at the central platform. The rift is growing. It's replicating Virexi patterns and inserting temporal anomalies. Earlier today, one of the researchers briefly experienced a conversation from 2 days in the future. Was it a good conversation? They argued about soup. Consensus was never reached. Airly stepped onto the edge of the observation deck. Beyond the glass, the stars shimmered unnaturally. A wide ribbon of distortion unraveled like someone trying to fold space using only impatience and quantum glue. John joined her. That's not what a sky's supposed to look like. It's not sky, it's reflection. The observatory systems hummed louder. Screens displayed overlapping versions of the same location. One with familiar stars, one with subtle architectural changes. In one, John noticed a version of himself standing slightly to the left, holding a different beverage. He pointed. Is that T-me? Possibly. He looks smug. You always do. Elzen activated the temporal harmonic stabilizer, which sounded like a wind chime falling down a steel staircase. Airly took John's hand and placed it on the central console. The interface blinked. John muttered, I probably should have signed something before touching this. Too late. A pulse of light shot outward, flattening the distortion into a single wavering band. The observatory quieted. Then slowly, the stars reassembled themselves. A quiet ripple of applause broke out among the staff. Elzen nodded. Dimensional fabric is now 90% resynchronized. Excellent work. You have harmonized effectively. I harmonize by standing and not dying. An often underappreciated skill. Back in their quarters, John peeled off the ceremonial gloves that had somehow appeared mid-ritual. So we averted disaster. Again. Are we always going to be this dramatic? Yes, he sighed. Can I at least have a normal dinner this time? Airly paused. Define normal. No tentacles, no food that tries to leave the plate, no secret royal enzymes. She considered. That leaves ice water and maybe a starch cube. I'll take it. Before she left, she turned at the doorway. You are more adaptable than I anticipated. And you're less terrifying than I assumed. She tilted her head. Your honesty is oddly persuasive. John smiled. So is your complete refusal to laugh at my jokes. Keeps me guessing. She left without another word. Sarah chimed in. You remain unpredictably effective, John. Thanks, SARA. One day you might even be regal. He paused. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. John stood on the ceremonial balcony, holding what he now knew was not a goblet, but a portable nutrient resonance prism. It shimmered faintly with something that probably wasn't juice. Below, thousands of Virexi citizens gathered on the levitating tiers of the Capitol Plaza, their iridescent banners shifting in sync with the city's pulse. Sarah whispered through his ear link, Your heart rate is elevated. Is it the speech or the beverage? Both. I think this juice is trying to unionize. Behind him, Airly approached in full regalia, her expression unreadable as usual. Her ears twitched in subtle intervals, which John now knew signified mild anticipation. She stopped beside him. You prepared? Prepared to speak to a crowd of psychic alien citizens while balancing constitutional reform and my ongoing imposter syndrome? Yep, totally. They like you. Not as much as they like laughing at me. That helps. Elzen stepped forward and handed John a data slate. Your official statement of allegiance and unity. Try not to improvise. John scanned the text. This says I pledge fealty to the throne, the stars, and the eternal flow of legislative harmony. Correct. Any chance I can add a clause about public nap breaks and snack reform? Airley gave him a side glance. No. John took a breath, stepped forward, and activated the vocal uplink. A hologram of his upper body projected above the crowd, 3 times life-size and blinking too often. He cleared his throat. Hi, I'm John. You probably know me as the human consort or the guy who fell during the moon ceremony, or that one meme with the fish hat. The crowd rustled with what could generously be called laughter. I came here by accident, sort of. There was a trade negotiation, a cultural misunderstanding, and then someone declared me married. A larger ripple of amusement followed. But then things kept happening. There were space rifts, sentient wallpaper, time hiccups, political side-eye, and a lot of breakfast foods I still don't understand. And through all that, I learned that this empire isn't just about order and tradition. It's also about adaptation, change, weird little miracles wrapped in formality and bureaucracy. He looked at Airley. And sometimes in the middle of all that, you meet someone who challenges you in just the right way. Someone who is terrifyingly capable, emotionally efficient, and also secretly a little lonely. Airley didn't react, but her ears twitched twice. I used to think diplomacy was paperwork and coffee. Now I know it's mostly improvisation, occasional swordplay, and being willing to admit when you're out of your depth. Which I still am, constantly, but I'm learning. He held up the slate. So yeah, I pledge all that stuff. Throne, stars, legislative whatever. But also, I pledge to keep showing up, keep listening, keep making jokes at the worst possible time, because apparently that's my niche now. He ended the broadcast. Applause rippled up the tiers like a rising tide. Back inside, Elzen nodded once. Acceptable. You did not spontaneously combust. Progress Airley gestured for John to follow her. They exited through a private corridor that opened into the royal cortex, a place of crystalline data pillars and floating memory threads. She gestured to one thread, glowing softly. It displayed their entire political arc, edited slightly for clarity and fewer wardrobe malfunctions. This will become part of the archive, she said. Does it include the part where I accidentally insulted your cousin's hairstyle and caused a 7-hour standoff? It has been recontextualized. John squinted. Do I look taller in it? Yes. I'm fine with that. She turned to him. The citizens believe in this union now. You mean us? She nodded. Well, I believe in it too. Still not sure how or why, but I do. There was a pause. She stepped closer. You've changed. You mean I've matured? Number, you've adapted. He smiled. I'll take it. Later that night, John stood on the palace rooftop, gazing up at the stars. Sarah whispered, You're requested in the consort's study. An ambassador from the Orion Fold has arrived and brought something called a guilt fruit. Guilt fruit? It causes brief but intense reflections on past mistakes. Ah, so like therapy, but with juice. Correct. John turned back to the stars. The sky was stable again, the mirror dimension sealed, and his role here, unexpected as it was, felt real now. Not because he'd conquered anything or become a hero, but because he'd survived, laughed, listened, and occasionally managed not to trip in public. Airley joined him a moment later. No words, just quiet starlight and shared stillness. He nudged her gently. So, if I were single? You're not. Right, just checking. She looked up. Good. The stars didn't answer. They didn't need to. It began with a beetle. Not just any beetle. No, this one had wings that shimmered like polished star glass and left behind a trail of faintly glowing pollen that spelled out ancient Kaelerian curse words if you squinted just right. Terran Greaves, age 8, child of Terran diplomats and proud owner of precisely 0 common sense, chased it anyway. It darted through the archway of the diplomatic compound, across the moss-slick stones of the reflecting garden, and straight into the deep, humming green of Kaler Prime's jungle. I just want to be friends, Terran yelled, stumbling after it with the kind of optimism only a child or a malfunctioning protocol droid could muster. Or maybe keep you in a jar for scientific reasons. The beetle responded by veering left, right, and then somehow up. Terran, not built for vertical maneuvering, tripped over a root the size of his leg and tumbled headfirst into a curtain of vines that smelled faintly like mint and distant regrets. On the other side was a clearing, and something else. The something growled. It was large, too many legs, eyes like boiling ink, and teeth that looked like they belonged on a creature with dental insurance and a grudge against anything that breathed. Terran froze. So did the beetle, which hovered like a tiny bioluminescent witness preparing a very specific obituary. The beast lunged. A sharp sound cracked through the air, clean and bright like a tuning fork slammed against metal. The creature stopped mid-leap and twitched. Then it collapsed, sizzling where a violet bolt of energy had sliced clean through the nerve cluster at the back of its head. Terran blinked, then blinked again, just to be sure he hadn't dreamed the last 3 seconds. Standing over the creature's corpse was a girl. She looked maybe a year older than him, though with Calirians, it was hard to tell. She had long, sea-glass hair tied back with strips of fiber leaf, skin the soft lavender of twilight, and ears, long, upward curving and twitching in mild exasperation. She held a pulse bow that still glowed from the shot, and she was not impressed. "You were going to be mulch," she said flatly, her voice like rain on stone. Soft, fleshy, screaming mulch. "Hi," Terran said, because his brain had lost contact with the part of him responsible for smart things. "Thanks for not letting me die like mulch." She cocked her head. "Do humans always follow glowing insects into certain death?" "No," he said immediately. "Sometimes we follow cats, or the smell of food, or loud noises. It's kind of an instinct." She narrowed her eyes. "Is your translator functioning correctly?" "I think so," Terran replied, "though my mom says it sometimes replaces thank you with I'm stupid." Might be a bug. There was a pause, then, barely a flicker of a smile, brief as lightning. Her ears twitched again. "I'm Siratai," she said. "I'm Terran," he replied, grinning. "Terran Greaves. I live over there." He gestured vaguely in the direction of the compound, which was currently invisible behind several metric tons of jungle. "You live in the stone egg with the metal fences?" "Yep. My dad says it's diplomatically neutral, which I think means boring and gray." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are strange. You say that like it's a bad thing." A beat. Then she turned and began walking back through the brush, not looking to see if he followed. Her voice drifted behind her. "Strange things die faster in the jungle." Terran scrambled after her, doing his best to avoid any more roots with murderous intent. "I think that's technically true everywhere." She didn't answer, but she didn't stop him either. They reached a high stone outcropping overlooking the old creek. Roots of ancient trees twisted over the water like braided silver, and somewhere in the distance, one of the giant canopy beasts made a sound like a freight train getting a foot massage. Siratai sat cross-legged and began cleaning her bow. Terran flopped beside her, not gracefully. "So you're a warrior?" he asked after a long silence. "I'm training," she said. "I'm training too," Terran said. "To not die, mostly." She didn't laugh, but she did smirk a little. The sun dipped low, casting blue and orange shafts through the upper canopy. Birds with trumpet beaks and attitude problems screeched overhead. "You know," Terran said, swinging his legs, "you saved my life." "I did. So technically you own it now. That's how it works in stories." She turned her head. "I don't want it." Terran scratched his neck, then nodded solemnly. "Well, I guess I'll just have to marry you then." Siratai blinked. "What?" "You know," he said, "that's what people do when they care about each other. Marry, and you saved me. That's a pretty big care." There was a pause, then she laughed. It was like wind chimes knocked over by a mischievous wind, clear and chaotic and impossibly lovely. Her ears twitched like mad. "You are either very brave," she said, "or very stupid." "Why not both?" he offered with a grin. She shook her head, eyes amused. "You can't marry a wayfinder." "Why not?" "Because we go where no one follows." "Maybe I'll catch up," Terran said. "You're 8, she replied. "Gives me time." She stared at him, eyes unreadable, then stood. "Come on, before you get eaten by something else." He followed her back, glowing beetle long forgotten. By the time they returned to the compound's edge, where the guards were panicking and preparing a search party, Taryn was sure of one thing. He'd meant it, every word. And though Siratai walked back into the trees without looking back, something in the tilt of her ears said she'd remember it too. The training droid exploded again. Taryn rolled away from the burst of sparks, coughing, one sleeve smoldering, and the other stuck to his arm with a substance that looked suspiciously like synthetic custard. Across the cracked tiles of the TUDF training deck, Sergeant Dren whistled low through her artificial teeth. "That's the third one this week, Greaves," she said, folding mechanical arms across her chest. "You got a thing against perfectly good military equipment?" Taryn groaned and sat up. "It shot first. You programmed it to shoot first." "Exactly. I'm a realist." Dren snorted, then tapped a pad. Another drone popped from the storage bay. It hovered ominously, scanning the room for survivors. Taryn waved at it. "Hi, I'm your new trauma." He'd grown up faster than most. After Kaler Prime was declared off limits and his parents were recalled to Terra 3, diplomatic life became a cocktail of sterile meetings and galactic food rations. At 16, he'd lied about his age and joined the Terran Union Defense Force. By the time they found out, he'd already graduated top of his class in reconnaissance and field subversion. Mostly because he cheated, strategically. At 23, he was a specialist with 2 commendations, 1 artificial rib, and a persistent reputation for surviving missions that should have ended with body bags and morning playlists. And through it all, he remembered her, Siratai, with her storm-glow hair and ears like curved blades. He hadn't seen her since that day in the jungle, but the memory lived like a background process in his brain, always running, occasionally glitching into dreams. His AI companion, Morty, flickered into view on the retinal HUD, an avatar shaped like a disgruntled penguin wearing a lab coat. "You're thinking about her again," Morty said. "Your heart rate is up, and your oxygen levels spiked." "I was just in an explosion." "Yeah, but you didn't flinch when the wall caved in. You flinched when I said her." Taryn scowled. "You know, most AIs aren't emotionally manipulative." Morty spread his flippers. "Most AIs aren't assigned to you." "Fair." He stood, brushing off his uniform. The nanoweave groaned in protest. One of his boots squeaked wetly. "You smell like shame and burnt cheese," Morty added helpfully. "I live to impress." Later that night, in the shared barracks, Taryn lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling, while the hum of hypersleep pods filled the room with synthetic comfort. Above him, someone snored like a malfunctioning wind turbine. He opened his data scroll and pulled up a picture. Pixelated, overexposed, and likely taken by accident. Siratai, 12 years old, mid-laugh. The jungle behind her blurred into light. He never showed it to anyone. Not because he was embarrassed, but because people would ask the kind of questions that deserved answers he didn't have. The war started on a Tuesday. It wasn't really a war yet, just a series of escalating tactical confrontations across multiple systems, which meant the Terran Union had found something valuable, and someone else had the gall to live on top of it. This time it was a chain of planets near the Calirian fringe. Uncharted territory where the Wayfinders walked and logic went to die. Terran's unit was sent in as Advanced Observation, which was military code for, if anyone shoots at you, die creatively. They were dropped onto a moon with breathable air and gravity just high enough to make you feel like you were constantly disappointing it. The mission went south in the way that involved orbital bombardment and a species of hostile fauna that communicated using venom. Terran barely made it back to the evac point with 2 rookies and a data pad full of very angry maps. When the gunship lifted, he laughed until he coughed up blood. By what? Something with a sense of irony, a soft sound behind them, barely a shift in the wind. Terran spun, rifle raised, heart kicking in his chest like a toddler on sugar, but the clearing was empty. Kel squinted into the trees. "You sure she's real?" Terran lowered his weapon. "I was 8, not hallucinating." That's what people say before they discover they've been in love with a tree spirit for 20 years. That happened to you once. That's beside the point. They pressed deeper into the ruins, scanning for heat signatures and movement. The forest pressed back, every leaf and vine whispering secrets in languages older than the stars. And then, another sound. Different this time. Laughter. Light. sharp, familiar. Taryn froze. From the trees above, a figure dropped in silence. She landed like gravity was just a polite suggestion. Bow in hand, expression unreadable. Her ears were long and curved, her hair tied back with strips of something glowing faintly blue. She moved with the kind of grace that only came from a lifetime of training or well-calibrated physics cheats. Kel let out a yelp and almost discharged her weapon. "Taryn Greaves," said Siratai. His brain stalled for a full 2 seconds before catching up. "Sira," he breathed, "you haven't aged a day." She tilted her head. "You have. Badly." "I missed you too." She didn't smile. "Not yet. You came back." "I said I would." "You also said you'd marry me." "I keep my promises." Kel blinked. "Wait. What now?" Siratai stepped closer, bow lowered, but still glowing along the spine. Her eyes scanned him. Armor, scars, weapons, weight of too many missions. "You carry war with you." He nodded. "You carry a bow that shoots through tanks." "Touché." They stood in silence, measuring the years in the space between words. Then Sira flicked her wrist. "Come, you're being watched." "By what?" "By everyone. You're loud." Kel muttered something about being a professional, then followed them through the undergrowth into a clearing that shimmered slightly at the edges. A cloaking field dropped, revealing a village grown into the bones of the forest. Homes carved from trees, light threads woven like vines, technology hidden behind the aesthetic of wildness. Kalirian stepped forward, silent and curious. All long ears, sharp eyes, and suspicious grace. "Taryn Greaves," Sira said, addressing the group. "The Mulch Boy returns." He cleared his throat. "Still not Mulch." "That's debatable." An elder stepped forward, taller than the others, with a walking staff that pulsed gently in sync with the ground. "This is him?" the elder asked, voice like moss over metal. "The one who proposed," Sira confirmed. Taryn raised a hand. "Hi, just to clarify, I was 8. It was a legally non-binding promise." The elder smiled, showing teeth that had never known orthodontics. "Promises made in innocence are still watched by the stars." Kel leaned toward him. "Are you engaged to an entire planet?" "Not the worst thing I've agreed to." Sira gestured for him to follow. "Come, we need to talk. And if you're going to marry me, you need a better haircut." He blinked. "Wait, so you're—" She didn't answer, just walked ahead. Morty whispered in his ear. "Okay, this is getting serious. I need you to rank your priorities. Mission, personal safety, and whatever weird romantic subplot you're living through." "Shut up, Morty." They entered a dwelling built into the curve of a massive tree, its walls humming faintly with energy. She sat cross-legged on a cushion. He sat opposite, trying not to knock anything over. "You really came back," she said softly. "I meant to," he said. "Took a little longer than expected. War, training, minor emotional repression." Sira studied him. "You've killed." "Yes." "You've been broken." "Frequently." "And still." I remembered. Silence stretched. Then barely, she smiled. "You still talk too much. And you still look at me like I might fall into a hole." "You still might," he laughed. "I'd marry you for your sense of humor alone. I'd marry you just to see how long you'd survive the wedding trials." "Is that a threat?" "It's a Kalirian tradition." "Right, that's comforting." Outside, the jungle murmured. "You know, Nana," Morty said, "if you keep cheating death like this, it's going to start taking it personally." Taryn wiped his mouth. "Then it should learn to take a joke." He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he searched. It took digging through 3 encrypted black line networks and 1 favor from a smuggler named Goat, but eventually a file pinged back. CAELIMRPRIME. Status: restricted, contact pending. There were rumors that the planet was still untouched, that the Kalirians had vanished deeper into the wild zones, taking their ancient tech and their silence with them, that anyone who tried to land without permission disappeared or came back different. Fewer bones, more memories. Terran stared at the status notice. His finger hovered over the transmit line. "Don't do it," Morty said. "Do what?" "Whatever it is you're about to do, that ends with us covered in moss and screaming." Taryn grinned. I'm just checking logistics. Is this about your childhood girlfriend who may or may not exist? She exists. You met her once, when you were 8. She laughed at my jokes. That counts. You also thought pudding was a type of weather. Taryn sent the request. 2 weeks later, he was summoned to a meeting with Central Command. The admiral in charge looked like she'd been carved out of recycled steel and caffeine. She didn't blink. Greaves, she said. You've got history with Kaler Prime. Yes, ma'am. You ever been shot by a biosphere? No, ma'am. Would you like to be? Not particularly, ma'am. Too bad, you're being reassigned. He didn't speak, just waited. She slid a file across the holotable. Unmanned scout drones picked up Kalerian movement near the old diplomatic compound. Looks like the natives aren't as extinct as we thought. Taryn opened the file. Coordinates, atmospheric readings, troop positions. One image, grainy and stretched, of a figure standing among the vines. Cloaked, bow in hand, long ears tilted forward. Do not engage, the admiral said. This is recon only, understand? Yes, ma'am. Good. Try not to propose to anyone this time. He didn't answer, but Morty muttered, too late. As the dropship descended through the storm-lit atmosphere of Kaler Prime, Taryn stood in the doorway, helmet under one arm, and stared down at the jungle that had shaped him. Somewhere beneath that endless green, she walked, and this time he intended to catch up. The landing was textbook, which meant the dropship didn't explode, flip, or get eaten by one of the larger local species that classified metal as a food group. The hatch hissed open, and Kaler Prime's atmosphere drifted in, thick with humidity, electric spores, and the unmistakable smell of wet arrogance. Taryn stepped onto the soil like it owed him something. Behind him, Private Kell tripped on her own foot, face planted, and started taking air samples while pretending it was intentional. Ah, yes, she mumbled into the dirt. Rich topsoil, complex microbial network, and my shame. Morty flickered to life in Taryn's HUD, perched on his shoulder like a disappointed conscience. Welcome back to Kaler Prime. Now 60% more deadly and 100% more humid than you remember. Taryn ignored him and adjusted his gear. The forest hadn't changed. Trees coiled around each other like gossiping giants. The air buzzed with insects that looked too sentient and made eye contact for too long. Somewhere far off, a beast howled like it had opinions on politics. Still smells like salad left in a sun lamp, he muttered. Do you think she's still here? Morty asked. She was in that drone footage, or someone with the same ears. Big assumption. What if it's a fashion trend? Then I'm underdressed. They moved quickly, sticking to the old diplomat paths that had long since been swallowed by moss and polite threats from the local ecosystem. Their destination was the ruins of the compound, once a marvel of interspecies cooperation, now a deluxe snack tray for jungle flora. As they approached the perimeter, Taryn raised a fist. Kell stopped mid-step and immediately fell into a bush with the grace of a stunned eel. Taryn crouched and scanned the clearing. No sign of movement, no visible life forms, no traps that screamed, ha ha, surprise arrows. And yet the hairs on his neck stood at military attention. He motioned forward, stepping over a twisted arch that had once been the main gate. Inside, the compound was half crushed by tree limbs, but the central chamber remained. Cracked pillars, moss-choked consoles, and the ghost of bureaucratic boredom. Taryn knelt by a patch of scorched earth. Plasma burn, he muttered. Not recent, weeks old. Kell poked at a fallen drone with a stick. This one's been gnawed on. Inside, something old and promised shifted into place. The wedding trials began at dawn. Technically, they weren't called wedding trials in the official Kalerian dialect, but the direct translation, soul-binding ritual of ascendant reckoning and emotional honesty, felt like overkill. Taryn had lobbied for mild relationship obstacle course. He was outvoted by a council of elders, a sentient vine, and a ceremonial lizard named Borp. You'll be fine, Sierra said, fastening her vambrace with a smirk that did not, in fact, inspire confidence. Taryn tugged at the collar of the ceremonial garb they'd given him, which looked like a cross between a tactical harness and a formal bathrobe. Define fine, not dead. I feel very much like I'm being set up for cultural embarrassment. That's part of the bonding process. Morty appeared in his retinal display, wearing a tiny tuxedo and holding a clipboard. I've reviewed the rituals. Trial 1 is the path of trust. Taryn raised an eyebrow. That sounds promising, Morty continued. You will be blindfolded and guided across a rope bridge, suspended over a field of intelligent thorns. The thorns are capable of projecting your deepest fears into your nervous system. Taryn blinked. Okay, slightly less promising. They've agreed to dampen the hallucinations to a PG-13 level. That's generous. Sierra handed him a strip of dark fabric. Ready? Number. But let's pretend I am. She tied the blindfold and suddenly Taryn's world was all sound and scent. The buzz of morning insects, the warm spice of her proximity, the faint rustle of wind through leaves. Then came her voice, calm and precise. Step forward. 2 paces. He obeyed, foot touching wood, then rope, then that awful bouncing sensation only rope bridges can offer. To your left, half a step. He shifted. Now forward again. Trust me. He did. Behind the blindfold, his mind threw up its usual slideshow. War, failure, the moment he was shot in the stomach by a teenager who thought he was the enemy. And, woven between it all, Sierra's laugh on that long-ago day. The way she looked when she said his name. The way she hadn't blinked when she saw who he'd become. I'm still here, she murmured. I know. Almost there. A creak. The rope shifted. A whisper slithered across his thoughts. You left her. You chose war. You're broken. He clenched his fists. Hey, Thorns? Silence. Your projections suck. The voices sputtered and faded. Sierra tugged his arm. You made it. He yanked the blindfold off. The bridge was behind him, intact. No thorns. Just the amused faces of half a dozen Kalerians who'd clearly placed bets on his survival. Trial 2, Morty said cheerfully. The dance of alignment. Taryn stared at him. Please tell me this isn't literal. Oh, it is. You will perform a choreographed movement sequence with Sierra tie in front of the entire village. I haven't danced since my cousin's wedding. I punched the DJ. Then you're due for a comeback. The dance turned out to be a test of synchronization, focus, and not stepping on your partner's feet. It was performed barefoot in a shallow pool filled with bioluminescent algae that reacted to movement, lighting up trails with every step. Remember, Sierra said, just follow me. He nodded. Then she spun, ducked, twirled, and leapt in a sequence that may have involved partial teleportation. Taryn tried to mimic her. The algae flashed red. Someone coughed politely. He reset, focused, watched her instead of the pressure. Her feet, her breathing, the rhythm she carried in her bones. He fell into it, not perfectly, but with enough grace that by the end of the sequence, the pool was awash in golden light and no one had called for a medic. Sierra smiled at him, just barely. You don't completely suck. High praise. They rested that night in the high canopy lodge, hammocks strung between singing trees and privacy, granted by thick nets of woven luminescent silk. I was sure you'd fall off the bridge, Sierra admitted. I was sure I'd pass out during the dance. You actually did better than most initiates. He grinned. So I'm fiancé material? You're very persistent. Is that a compliment? It's Kalerian for yes, probably. He laughed. She did too. A quiet thing, edged with something ancient and warm. In the morning, Trial 3 was announced. The echo chamber, Morty said. Each of you will enter alone. The chamber will simulate a future that might be. You must face it without resistance. Taryn frowned. Simulate how? Neuro-responsive tech, Sierra explained. Built from the wreckage of a ship that fell here before the last war. The chamber maps your psyche and shows you possibilities. Wow, what happens if we fail? She hesitated. You don't return unchanged. Taryn stood before the archway, brushed his fingers along the runes etched into the frame, and stepped through. Darkness, then light. He stood in a ruined city, blasted steel towers, ash drifting like snow. People ran, screamed, dissolved into sparks. Taryn walked forward. His armor felt heavier. A voice echoed across the skyline. You left again. You promised, and you left. He turned. Sierra stood before him, but older, hollow-eyed, wrapped in battle leathers and grief. I tried to stop it, he said. You always try. You never stay. He reached out. She vanished. Another version appeared, young, smiling, childlike. I waited, she said. He closed his eyes. This wasn't about war. It was about the choice to keep choosing, to show up again and again, even when it was hard. I'm still here, he said aloud. The city melted into stars. He awoke outside the chamber, sweating, breath sharp. Sierra stood beside him. You passed? Barely. What did you see? You. What I might lose. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she offered her hand. One trial remains. Taryn raised an eyebrow. Does it involve more thorns? She shook her head. This one's simple. He waited. You just have to stay. The wedding was scheduled for the third moonrise, which meant everyone had precisely 7.5 hours to panic, over-decorate, and argue about whether the ceremonial mushroom platters should glow or not. The council voted yes. The mushrooms voted no. A compromise was reached where only half would glow and the other half would politely simmer. Taryn sat on a carved stone bench in a tunic that shimmered with subtle refractive plating. He tugged at the collar for the 14th time. I look like a hologram in denial. You look like a warrior who got run over by a textile merchant, said Kel, stepping beside him with 2 drinks and 0 sympathy. I miss armor. That's because armor doesn't ask how you feel or what your intentions are. I have perfectly noble intentions. Taryn, last week you punched a tree because it startled you. It growled first. It was a fruit-bearing tree. It growled fruitfully. Kel handed him a drink. You've changed, but you still talk nonsense. He sipped. The drink fizzed, then changed color twice before settling on something dangerously orange. She's going to make me climb a mountain, isn't she? She already did. Metaphorically? Literally. Right. From above, light strung through the canopy pulsed to the rhythm of Kaelerian music. Notes that curled like vines and chords that hummed like heartbeat monitors. Sierra appeared on a high platform, dressed in layered silks and armor, her long ears adorned with bands that shimmered like distant galaxies. Taryn stood, and the crowd hushed. A procession began. Not one of flower petals or slow, reverent walks, but a dance, wild and complex, meant to display intention through movement. Sierra spun through the air, each leap meaning trust, each strike of her staff against stone declaring presence. Taryn followed, not with the same grace, but with something just as deliberate. His rhythm was different, offbeat, defiant, human. And yet they met in the center, movement synchronized not by perfection, but by belief. The elder stepped forward. You return not just to a place, but to a promise. Do you understand what this means? Taryn nodded. I do. Sierra tilted her head. You still have a choice. I've made it. The elder turned to her. And you? She looked at him for a long time. He was a child when he made that vow. I waited. I fought. I lost faith. But he came back, not as a soldier, but as someone who remembered. Morty flickered to life beside them, wearing a tiny monocle and a floating sash that read, Best Man. He gave a cough. Ahem. Before we get too emotionally stable, I would like to present the registry. Taryn, you now own 1 ceremonial vine, 3 spore lanterns, and a subscription to Intergalactic Farmers Monthly. Sierra smirked. You're keeping the vine. It likes you. It tried to kiss me. That means it respects you. The elder raised his staff, which responded with a pulse that echoed through the jungle. By vow and return, by choice and echo, by fear faced and truth spoken, you are now bound. The moment settled like dew. Then a blaring alarm cut through the stillness. Everyone turned. Kel activated her wrist display. There's a ship. Human design. Military signature. They're not broadcasting peace. Taryn and Sierra locked eyes. I'll handle it, he said. Together, she corrected. They stepped through the trees to the outer watch point where a dropship was descending fast, heat shimmer trailing behind it like a tale of bad decisions. A figure emerged from the ramp, grizzled, armored, and yelling into a comlink. Greaves, I swear, if you don't respond, I'll demote you to space janitor. Terran blinked. Commander Draxel, where the hell have you been? We've got a ceasefire falling apart and diplomatic tapestries unraveling. I'm on leave. Draxel paused. You're what? Married leave. To an alien. To a Calirian warrior diplomat who can decapitate a man with a grapefruit. Draxel looked at Sierra, who offered a charming smile and a blade made of light. Right, he said. Makes sense. Carry on. The commander turned and shouted something about needing a new map and better hiring standards, then stomped back into his ship. Terran exhaled. That was weirdly painless. Diplomacy is about presentation, Sierra said. You mean intimidation? It's a subset. Later, as the moons rose and the festivities resumed, Terran stood with Sierra on a high platform. Below, laughter, music, and faint arguing over whether the glowing mushrooms were edible filled the air. You're not who you were, she said. I don't think I am. You're still annoying. Consistency is important. She took his hand. You stayed. I will. He looked out over the canopy, where stars blinked through clouds and time slowed in the space between beats. Do you think, he asked, we're ridiculous? Deeply. I'm okay with that. Me too. The moons reached their peak, light draping the village in soft silver, and somewhere between what was and what might be, a promise once made in innocence became real. Not because it was perfect, or easy, or planned, but because someone came back, and this time, he stayed.